Welcome to the Dinosaur George podcast, a show about paleontology and other earth sciences. Dinosaur George is a public speaker, author, and TV host with 30 years of study in paleontology. He has performed live in over 4,500 events across the US and Canada. Now, here is Dinosaur George.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to the Dinosaur George podcast. In this episode, the feature creature is not an animal this time. Instead, it is a subject, prehistoric migration, where animals migrate or encroach into areas where they weren't before. We have an interview with Dr. Jon A. Baskin, a man who's going to be able to tell us a lot about one of those migrations that you may be surprised about. It's not one that's spoken about that often. Also, I'm kicking off a new program called Science Safari. In this segment, I will suggest museums or places to visit. I've had a lot of people call or write and say, hey, can you recommend a museum that we might be interested in seeing? So it's called Science Safari, and I'll kick it off in this particular episode. And then at the end, I will answer some Ask Dinosaur George questions. You have to excuse me for my voice. I know it sounds very rough, or at least it sounds rough to me because it is rough. Allergies must be kicking in, either that or I just recently did a bunch of public speaking and I think I sort of got worn out. So anyway, as always, sit back, take a seat, relax, and let's get ready to roll.
Raptors are the most deadly dinosaurs that ever lived, and now you can own their replica claws, feet, and skulls. Imagine your own velociraptor skull or the foot of a giant Utah raptor. Raptor hand claws and deadly killer claws are just some of the items you'll find in our web store. We accept all forms of payment and ship worldwide. Our pricing is affordable and we don't charge outrageous shipping or handling fees. Visit our website at store.dinosaurgeorge.com and start your collection today.
It's time for our Feature Creature segment. If you would like to suggest a creature, go to dinosaurgeorgepodcast.com and post it in the comments section of this episode, or email us your suggestions to contact@dinosaurgeorge.com. And now, our feature creature.
All right, as I said before, the feature creature today is not one particular animal, but is instead an event. Now, throughout history, strange animals have appeared and then disappeared from the fossil record. Some of these animals simply evolved from earlier ancestors who had lived in that given area for generations. But every now and then, we see a large number of these new species migrate or encroach into new areas. The arrival of these new species can have a dramatic impact on the environment. We see that today, living here in Texas, when fire ants moved in. They actually altered the environment, and they still are. You know, they're animals that were nesting underground like rabbits and ground nesting birds like quail. Well, what happened is these animals have absolutely no defense against these tiny fire ants. And if you don't know what a fire ant is, it's a little ant that when it stings you, it literally feels like somebody took a lit match and touched it against your skin. That's how it gets the name fire ants. Well, these little fire ants moved in and they're killing all kinds of animals because the animals have no defense against them. Well, that's happened throughout time with these animals moving in and out. Now, many of us are familiar with one of these biggest events, and that's the one called the Bering Strait theory. This theory proposes that large numbers of species from Siberia migrated to Alaska across a land bridge that spanned the current-day Bering Strait. Now, although this migration introduced a lot of new species into North America, it's not the only event of its kind. Here to tell us about another mass migration from the Department of Biological and Health Sciences at Texas A&M University-Kingsville in Kingsville, Texas, is Professor Jon Baskin. Dr. Baskin, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. Looking forward to talking to you.
Well, great. Now, it's customary for me to kind of ask our guests to give us a little bit about themselves. Tell us a little bit about your background and about what you do.
Oh, I'm kind of all spread out. I started off as a physics major, and that didn't work out, so went on to change schools, moved over to the big city, New York City, went to New York University, where I received a degree in anthropology, more interested in physical anthropology, human evolution kind of things. Then worked for 2 years as a computer programmer in New York. Then went to the University of Arizona, where I did a master's thesis on small mammals, mostly little rodents from about 6-7 million years ago from northern Arizona, and then went on so I got my degree there in geosciences, then off to the University of Florida in Gainesville, where I received my PhD in the zoology department, working on carnivores that were from about 10 million years ago. And from there I moved to Kingsville in 1980, where I've been ever since, first in the geology department and now in the biology. Paleontologist, about half of my coursework is biological, other half of it is geological, so I'm a paleobiologist is what I am.
Man, you have seen every aspect of this country. How did you adjust to the weather difference between New York and Kingsville, Texas?
Well, I was, first to Tucson, Arizona, and Gainesville, Florida, and Gainesville, Florida isn't all that different from Kingsville, so hot and humid. I had years to get used to it in Florida.
Do you get a chance to ever go back up? Now, was home originally for you up in the New York area?
Boston, Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Do you still have family up there? Do you get a chance to ever go back much?
No family left, so I used to go once or twice a year to visit my mother, but I haven't been back to the Boston area in at least 15 or 20 years.
Oh, wow. So you're now an official Texan, and that's just it.
Well, I don't think you are unless you're born here, but I've certainly been here longer than my students. So.
Well, for most people, when we hear about migration, it all seems to be focused on the one that occurred over the Bering Strait. Well, you wrote a paper on another event that was taking place in a different part of the world. What is it called? And tell us what was going on.
All right. Well, the currently used name, and that's thanks to my PhD major professor, Dave Webb, is the Great American Biotic Interchange, or Great American Interchange, although the study of it goes back to South American paleontologists and then North American paleontologists at the turn of the 20th century, and then one of the people on my master's committee at the University of Arizona, George Simpson, who was perhaps, well, I won't even say perhaps, the greatest vertebrate paleontologist of the 20th century, devoted much of his career to studying mammal fauna of South America. So it goes back quite a way, and it focuses on what happened, and roughly, I'll just call it 5 million years ago. But up to that point, South America was an isolated island continent. Dr. Simpson wrote a book about 1980 called Splendid Isolation, where he wrote in a understandable way for just non-specialists about the history of the fauna of South America. So roughly before that time, South America was this island continent, and it had a much more distinct mammalian fauna than it even has today. Today it has the neotropics are easily recognized from the whole life in the neotropics. But before North and South America connected, there were no mammalian placental carnivores in South America. So the carnivores were either some giant birds for racings, or they were marsupial carnivores. And there were marsupial carnivores that grew to the size of great big wolves or big hyenas. And one of my favorites was one that Thylacis smilus, which was a saber-toothed marsupial, which had canines that roots never closed, so the canines kept growing throughout life, unlike Smilodon, or North American saber-tooth, and all the other North American or northern continent saber-tooths, where if they broke their saber, that's it. You go to La Brea, to the museum, George Page Museum at La Brea, where they have dozens upon dozens upon dozens of saber-toothed smilodon skulls. Smilodons with broken sabers is not all that unusual. So there's also hoofed mammals. So we think of hoofed mammals being lots of, in the bovid family, things like, cattle in North America, bison, and all the different antelopes, nilgai, elands, all this other are the main hoofed mammals, plus horses, rhinos. Those did not get into South America until North and South America connected. So there was their own unique families of hoofed mammals down there. So when the two continents connected roughly 5 million years ago, some things actually came across before that, the sloths, giant ground sloths in particular. But the big episode of faunal interchange began roughly about 5 million years ago when many families of North American mammals went south, and subfamilies of South American mammals and our friend the foraracine terror bird went north, and as they interacted, some survived and others went extinct. So it's a great biological experiment of mixing of faunas that we can see over a scale much longer than we can when us humans are introducing species to different parts of the world, to see that there are winners and there are losers.
My gosh. So what is the catalyst for allowing these two continents that are separated, I suspect by ocean, I would guess? What is the catalyst that causes that sudden ability to walk from one to the other?
Our good old friend plate tectonics. There's a trench that runs along the Pacific, a subduction zone responsible for the Andes along Central America, also a subduction zone. So the subduction zone was active, and over the course of millions of years, it built up from southern Mexico southward, but it did not connect Central America with South America until, depending on which geologist you want to accept, roughly just make it roughly 5 million years ago.
Wow.
So the volcanoes, the volcanic chain, as you go from Mexico down into Guatemala, then down to Costa Rica, and into Panama, get progressively younger. And it isn't until, again, roughly 5 million years ago that that gap was filled in. Now, there were things that were moving back and forth across the water. Some mammals went across that water, and notably the ground sloths from South America northward, beginning roughly 8 or 9 million years ago. But the big pulse of interchange with South American things coming north, North American things going south, really began 3 to 5 million years ago.
So we're all familiar with the big ground sloths, which are amazing. So those guys are the early transitional animals. They're the ones coming across before there was land. They're literally swimming across. And so there's some of the first ones to come in. But you had mentioned how many North American animals, the hoofed mammals that go down, those guys needed to wait until that land bridge was formed, right? That or close to that.
Mm-hmm.
So
there are some paleontologists who disagree, but most of us have the consensus is that it's not till, again, roughly 3 to 5 million years ago that the main pulse, and there's several episodes of faunal interchange that took place north to south, and particularly during the Pleistocene, the sea level rose and fell, falling sea levels that enabled the Bering Strait to emerge, broadened the savanna pathway to South America. So the same thing that enabled the interchange across the Bering Strait, east to west or west to east, also accelerated the interchange from north to south or from south to north.
one of the things that you said that amazed me was talking about that marsupial predator, and that at the time before this interchange took place, the only predatory mammals in South America were the
More wolf-like marsupials.
Wow.
And the more cat-like marsupials, including the one that had these ever-growing sabers.
That to me is fascinating. That sounds like a fascinating animal. For the younger kids that are listening, what would be the difference between a marsupial predator and, let's say, a cat, like the one you talked about in a cat? What would be the main difference between them?
Well, one is just an overgrown, much more nasty opossum, and the other is an overgrown and much more nastier house cat.
Well, if you've ever seen a possum, there's no doubt how nasty those animals can look.
Yeah, the part of the problem in terms of behavior is that all those large carnivorous marsupials are now extinct, so it's a lot of inference in terms of what they hunted, how they hunted, and whether there was a different strategy. I mean, even with Smilodon, there have been over the years, lots of different hypotheses on how Smilodon and other saber cats, because there are many different kinds of saber cats and other kinds of saber-toothed placental mammals, how they took down, what kind of prey they took down. Were they social? Were they solitary? Did they stalk? How did they pull down? Did they prefer larger mammals, medium-sized mammals? So it's speculative.
Sure.
It's based on looking at the skeleton and looking at the musculature and then trying to make analogies to living mammalian carnivores.
Right. And at least with the cats, we have some sort of modern counterpart that makes it a little easier. But when you're dealing with those marsupials, like you said, we don't have giant marsupials. So I guess it becomes more difficult to speculate because you really don't have that connection. So when animals leave a given area, how difficult do you think it would be for them to be able to adapt to both food sources and then new predators that maybe you've never come in contact with? How does the fossil record give us any sort of indication of how they do it?
Well, part of it is in terms of environments. If you look at it, once North and South America connected across the isthmus, then Central America and southern Mexico, where it's still tropical forest, is much more like South America than it is like from Mexico north in terms of the mammals. I won't speak about other things because I don't know that much about them, but say it's similar. So Central America is in southern Mexico, where it's still tropical forest, are still part of the neotropics. So, we're Costa Rica, where I spent a couple of weeks this summer. I mean, there you have the tree sloths, you have the monkeys, you have coatis, which do get into southern Texas and into Arizona. But a lot of the mammals are the monkeys, all the different kinds of monkeys. The sloths are South American. They're not North American. So it depends. I mean, so that's going to determine what came north, what went south. So in North America, things going south were a lot of grazing mammals because there were grasslands, and as South America dried out grasslands, they had an advantage. So in South America, horses, for instance, went into South America and went extinct at about the same time they went out here in North America as well. Tapirs went south. They survived because they're browsers. They did well in the tropical forests. It depends, what's going to survive. If something like the sloths came north, they were occupying a niche, these very large mixed feeders that were coming, both southern South America would be more arid kind of things that make their way north, and perhaps maybe in drier times. I really don't know. I need to ask Greg McDonald, one of my colleagues, who knows everything there is to know about sloths. But again, they managed to make it. They survived because there really wasn't anything in North America that would be competing with these large mixed feeders. Other things, the marsupial carnivores or at least give the traditional story, the placental carnivores had evolved over the course of millions of years with lots of different kinds of competition as mammals went back and forth from Eurasia to North America. They, for whatever reason, had the advantage, so they were able to outcompete as predators the South American marsupial carnivores. Some things got into South America. Bison didn't get in, but things like deer and javelinas made it in, and they did quite well. The South American native hoof mammals, some of them made the way north, some of them got in as far north as Texas, but they did not do well in competition with the North American hoofed mammals.
So their ability to adapt quickly determined whether they continued moving further into these areas. So if the plant life doesn't suit you as an herbivore, you're not going to continue pushing further into that. You're going to stay
well, if there's competition and something does it better, you're going to stop. But if there's no competition and you can take advantage of that resource, as the ground sloths were able to do, they were able to push, all the way up into Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Exactly.
So all of the ground sloths in the United States would have originated from South America.
Yeah, the ancestors, they diversified in North America, but they all derived from, there were like 4 or 5 families of ground sloths that made the way north and then diversified in North America.
That's just, it's hard sometimes to wrap your mind around the distances and the numbers of generations it takes to get into the, how many generational changes are there and how quickly are they moving? Are they relentlessly moving forward, or are they just slowly eating their way north? Is there any way, obviously the fossil record has limitations. Is there any way to tell if some of these animals were moving very quickly?
Well, there's not really the fossil record. It doesn't take that much. I mean, if you just move 10, 20 miles a year in the course of 1,000 years, you can go 10,000 miles. You can make your way north to south. It doesn't take that much movement. But climate did have effect because apparently ground sloths and such variety of South American mammals, including ground sloths and some of their other xenarthran relatives, they got into Mexico much earlier than they made it into the United States. They got into Mexico maybe 5 million years ago, and then it was another 1 or 2 million years before they spread throughout the continental United States. And was that related to climate, vegetation? Well, you need to ask somebody who worries about that kinds of thing. I'm just more of a systematic paleontologist, not a ecological paleontologist.
Right. You had mentioned about horses. So if I understand horse migration, they came from Europe across the Bering Strait into North America. And
no, they came from North America across the Bering Strait. At least the genus Equus, the modern horse, originated in North America. The genus Equus originated in North America, and same thing with camels, originated in North America. Tapirs originated in North America. So horses, camels, tapirs spread across the Bering Strait to Eurasia and went south. Horses, camels in the form of llamas, and tapirs also made their way into South America. And then they went extinct in North America. Horses also went extinct in South America, but tapirs and camelids, llamas and camels, have what we call a disjunct distribution. There's this huge gap between where they occur in tropical America versus where they occur in the Old World. And if you just look at it today, it just says how can they be so widely separated? But if you were here even as recently as 10,000, 12,000 years ago, there wasn't a gap in distribution.
Wow. So horses are North American based, migrate both north and south, but then here in North America and South, for whatever reason, they go away and then are reintroduced by humans later on.
Spanish.
Wow.
Came over. And that's another just amazing story, and one that I'm not well qualified to discuss, but the Plains Indians, who we think of as being nomadic horsemen, they lived with their horses. They were superb horse people. They depended on their horses. They did not see a horse until maybe 1600. And then they very rapidly became very closely associated with horses, and it's just a total change in their culture once they became able to move large distances on horseback. But the Plains Indians didn't see a horse to sometime in the 1600s would have been the earliest.
Wow.
Their ancestors saw them maybe 12,000 years ago, but there's this gap between 12,000 years ago and 300 years ago, 400 years ago.
That is amazing, because I remember reading once where somebody said, why didn't the Native American Indians utilize horses much earlier than before Europeans arrived? Well, because they weren't here.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's a story I've never heard told before. That's fascinating. That's pretty neat. Well, let me ask you something. I've got a friend who works at a zoo, and he says that the number one most dangerous thing they deal with when introducing new species that have never been in contact before is the threat of disease. So what sort of, obviously you have to adapt to plants and you have to adapt to predators. Do you think disease would have had the kind of impact that we've seen it have in other more recent history?
Well, that I really can't answer. Certainly, when Europeans came over to the New World, they either intentionally or accidentally introduced diseases that Europeans had evolved immunity to, thanks to having survived epidemics in the past. But the New World people had never been exposed to these viruses, bacteria, and their immune systems were overwhelmed and wiped out, exterminated populations in the New World. There are people who speculate that diseases were responsible for some of these Pleistocene extinctions. I've even heard people postulate that diseases were responsible for the extinctions at the end of the Cretaceous of the non-birdie dinosaurs. But that's speculation. There certainly is reason to believe that it could have happened, but I'm not aware of any solid evidence that it did happen. But it's fun to speculate about, but
sure,
you need to talk to somebody who knows more about those things than I do.
Right. Well, as someone that studies the bones, the only disease you would be able to even identify would be one that would deteriorate the bones, right? So if, let's say this thing has some sort of swine flu, well, that would be completely unknown to a paleontologist who's looking at the bones, because there would be nothing left on the bone that would suggest that they had some sort of viral illness. So that's why it's impossible for you to speculate how much disease would have affected it, unless it would have been a disease of the bone, and that's not necessarily transmittable. So, okay, you had touched on one of my favorite subjects, and that is those flightless birds. Those are the nastiest animals after the age of dinosaurs. They kind of fill the niche of the nightmare predators. So those flightless predatory birds, they emerge first in South America?
Well, no, they're a different radiation. So the Eocene diatrema from the Green River Formation is a different group. So there was an early North American radiation of giant predatory flightless birds, which, at the time of the earliest horses, Eohippus, Heracitherium, whatever's the accepted name now, were roaming North America and Europe. They went extinct. In South America, there was a different radiation of flightless birds, the forest racing birds, however that's pronounced. They're related to Seriamas, which is a flying South American bird. So they evolved in South America, and they go back quite a ways in South America, but they got biggest and nastiest as we get in the past few millions of years, and one of them, Titanus, made its way across from South America to Central America, and it's best known in Florida. I just have one toe of it from South Texas, but they have more remains of it from Florida of what Pierce Broadcorp described also from a toe bone, but then since then more material has been found of Titanus walleri, this giant carnivorous bird. I mean, you think of big birds today, ostriches is a big bird, and it certainly can kill you, but it's going to do it with its feet. It eats vegetation mostly, and it's got this little bitty head on this very long neck. But these four racing birds had huge heads, giant beaks. Even something like an eagle, their beaks were even proportionally longer than you'd see on an eagle.
Wow. So they're relying on speed to catch their prey, but they're mostly using, you think, their beak as the weapon to catch and kill it?
Well, I'm sure they use their feet as well. They may have stopped. I haven't, again, you need to ask some of the South American paleontologists who work with very complete There's some excellent from Argentina, some of the best paleontologists in the world. They dinosaurs and then also all of these South American mammals who know far more than I do. But, it's certainly, I'd imagine they could run them down, they could stomp on them, and then use their beak dispatch and cut up the meat. Cut through the bone.
Man. Now, the fossil formations that you have access to in your part of the state, for people that don't live in Texas, we refer to the lower part of Texas, where kind of the Texas where Texas meets the Mexico area. We refer that as the valley. Do you have access to a wide variety of formations from different periods, or is it more limited to what you have access to there?
Yeah, I mean, if you take a trip from San Antonio to Corpus Christi, particularly if you start on the north side of San Antonio, up on the Balcones Plateau, you take a trip back in time. So the limestones that you have in the northwestern part of San Antonio up into the hill country that make the hill country, Glen Rose Formation and some younger things, are about 90 million years old, Middle Cretaceous. As you make your way to the coast, you get to progressively younger and younger and younger deposits. So when you get to the southeast side of San Antonio, where you get out on the flats, it's all marine stuff. It's all Paleocene, Eocene marine, roughly 50 million years ago. You don't pick up terrestrial deposits till you get to about Three Rivers, where you get into the Fleming Formation and then the Goliad Formation. And the Goliad Formation has, in the area of Goliad and area elsewhere, you can pick up some extensive fossil mammal deposits from about, roughly, again, 10 million years ago. And these were mainly dug up back in the 1930s by work progress administration crews during the Depression that were being supervised by Elias Sellards of the Texas Memorial Museum. So they're all up in Austin where the collections are. But I've collected a few things from there. But once you get to Mathis, you then get into some more marine deposits of the Beaumont Formation, which is roughly runs a few 100,000 years old. And then once you get down to the coast, you're looking at very young geologically material. So from the coast, particularly along the Oasis River, when sea level was lower, these river valleys were excavated. If you were here 20,000 years ago, if you wanted to go to the beach, it would be like, I'll do it in miles, about 50 miles offshore, because sea level was something on the order of 100 meters, 300 feet lower than it is today, 18,000 years ago. The sea level came up, again, those river valleys filled in, and that's where I have, well, thanks to one of my colleagues, Rodney Thomas in particular, and his cooperation with the owners of some of the gravel pits, have been able to make some collections, mostly of mammals, that are about 13,000 years old, just before, at about the same time, or just before the first Native Americans made their way into this part of the world.
Wow. Talk about
from this part of the world, just locally, it's about 15,000. If I go between Mathis and Beeville, I can find from 5 million to maybe 10 million years old. And then it's pretty much marine. Get to San Antonio. If you want to find terrestrial deposits of about 90 million years old, you have to go up towards Fort Worth, where my colleagues Lou Jacobs and Tony Fiorello have done a lot of excavations of dinosaurs from that part of the world.
So the valley area that you're in, or what we refer to as the valley, all of the fossils, the majority of what you're going to find are going to be representative of the layers that are exposed, which are closer to the age of this migration between North and South America.
Yeah, but most of what we're going to find is going to be just at the very, very end of it, again, about 13,000. It began perhaps 5 million years ago. So what I'm seeing from the gravel pits that I've studied, the fossils in the gravel pits, that's after they've been here for a million years or more or so, or longer.
When you talk about a gravel pit, my first reaction is big, heavy machinery just gouging out this gravel to be used for, of course, construction and all that.
Right.
So
yes.
Are you able to go into the pits and look before they unearth things, or do they let you know when they find something? How do you get in there to? Obviously, this is not, the public can't go in there, but
No.
how are you able to find your specimens without them being destroyed or torn up during the process of them excavating for gravel?
Well, yeah, most of the time it's after it's been excavated. I mean, there's some things about 20 plus years ago, we were notified that they had found in place remains of a mammal, of a mammoth, a big elephant. By the way, Columbian mammoths were the big elephants. The woolly mammoth that everybody thinks is being monstrous is much smaller than a Columbian mammoth. So the woolly mammoth may have weighed, big male, maybe 4 tons, a big Indian elephant male, maybe 5 tons, a big African elephant male, perhaps 6 tons. These are maximum sizes. A big Columbian mammoth male might have pushed up to 8 tons.
Wow.
So there's a library in Corpus Christi, now called the Owen Hopkins Library, used to be Northwest Library. We have arranged through the material I've collected. I've collected for the University of Texas because they have a permanent collection. I've sent everything that we've collected here is almost all of it is now up there, but we arranged to have a front leg put on exhibit there and a tusk that was about 10 foot long. They have an exhibit there and some other bones. Anyhow, so they notified us, and they were very good about letting us go in. We're very fortunate that the owners, the managers, have been so cooperative. So And now it depends on how they're digging the pits. So I would be co-leading a field trip out there on Saturday. There's a big geological convention in Corpus Christi. The Gulf Coast Association of Geological Societies is having the annual meeting there. We're going to take a small group out to the pits. But now, because of how it's being dug, you can't get down into the pits. So it depends on what's going on. But most of the time, what we've gotten has been after it's been drag-lined, been dumped, thanks to cooperation with the gravel pit owners and operators. They set aside a lot of the larger material for us. And then other than that, it's walking, after it's come through the sorters, walking through the piles to pick up. And it's hit and miss. And now, particularly since the state wants gravel all of a particular size, they're crushing the larger material. So nowadays, it's almost impossible to find larger material.
Oh, that's a shame. But again, it's great of them to give you access when they do.
Oh, they're wonderful. They're just absolutely wonderful people. When I first got here, I went to some other gravel pits, and most of them would say, no, our insurance won't let you in.
Oh, sure.
Which is just an excuse.
Right.
They can't in. But, yeah, we've been very, very fortunate with the group that we've worked with. They're just terrific people.
That's amazing. One other question about the marsupial carnivores, just because I find them fascinating. The fact that South America had a lot of marsupials, if my understanding of the plate tectonics was Australia at one time associated closely to South America, and is that why there are marsupials in both, or was it just convergent evolution that they just evolved?
I mean, we're here in the age of the dinosaurs. There were marsupial and placental mammals in North America, including the ancestors of all the marsupials around the world today. In South America, there were mammals, but no marsupial or placental mammals. And in Australia, there were mammals, but again, no marsupial or placental mammals. We're the ancestors of the platypus that have been found in Australia. But roughly, at the end of the age of so-called end of the age of dinosaurs, there was a land bridge connection. It was a land bridge connection from North America to South America, or perhaps the island hopped over water. It got marsupials and some placental mammals into South America. And then through Antarctica, there was a connection from South America through Antarctica to Australia. And it's through that marsupials got into Australia. And they actually have, from some deposits roughly 50 million years old in the big peninsula of Antarctica, there are marsupial fossils.
Man, it just is so fascinating to me, this exchange of animals.
Back in the early part of the 20th century, when I was an undergraduate student, when plate tectonics was just becoming to be widely accepted and understood, it was a big problem. How did marsupials get to Australia? With plate tectonics and our understanding of how the plates have shifted and how Pangaea broke up and Gondwana broke up, we have a nice, easy route to get them into Australia, and it makes a whole lot more sense.
Right. Mammoths, you had mentioned mammoths. Are they, if I understand mammoths correctly, they came down into North America, and did they continue into South America? Because you mentioned the Colombian mammoth. Is its name reference to South America?
No, mammoths made their way from the old world into North America roughly 2 million years ago. But there are other mammoths are closely related to our living elephants. They're Elephantidae, the same family. But there were other families of elephant proboscideans that were present. So something like the mastodon is the Proboscidean, and it's been in North America for well over, I have to think, let's see, at least somewhere on the order of 20 million years they've been here. And then there's another family that came over from the old world called Gomphotheres. They look like elephants, but they're browsers, as opposed to elephants, which are mainly grazers.
Right.
So they have very different kinds of teeth. So in North America, we've had mastodons and Gomphotheres for tens of millions of years in North America, but we didn't have the members of the elephant family, the mammoths, until roughly 2 million years ago. So in South America, again, there were no elephants until the land bridge connected, in roughly 3 to 5 million years ago. And with that, the only family of proboscideans that made its way south was the Gomphothere family. So mastodons and mammoths stayed in North America, but Gomphotheres made it south. Mammoths probably didn't make it south for the same reason that bison didn't make it south, probably related to climate, diet, or something of that nature. But the Gomphothere elephants made their way in and were very successful, very diverse in South America until roughly 10,000 years ago, with the end of the Pleistocene big extinction.
Right.
It hit both North and South America.
Right. So, on a sort of simplistic description, we, being North America, sent horses and camels and tapirs and deer into
carnivores, jaguars, mountain lions, ocelots. They all went south. Lots of things went south.
And then from south, we get...
Well, the ones that made it up into the United States, we get all the ground sloths. We had capybaras that made their way up into Texas and then into Florida. In terms of what's successful, armadillos and opossums are flourishing here in North America.
So we got armadillos. So the giant armadillos that they have, and are armadillos from the same family as the anteaters?
Well, they're related. They're part of that South American native radiation that goes back, to the beginning of the Cenozoic. So yeah,
right.
They're anteaters, armadillos, and sloths are all closely related to each other.
So when
I first learned mammalogy, they're all put into one order, but now it's been split up into three. But again, they're more closely related to each other than to any other mammals.
Right. What about raccoons? Do you know whether they were from south to north or north? Is any idea with them?
Yeah, well, the procyanid family, which includes raccoons, coatis, kinkajous, ringtails, lingos, they all evolved in North America. Now, one group that did make its way early into South America were related to they're in the raccoon family, the Cyanazua group of South American procyanids made their way early. They crossed about the same time, southward about the same time that the ground sloths came north. So they went into South America and they diversified, and there was actually a bear-sized Cyanazua raccoon relative in South America until the bears made their way in a bit later. So the things like coatis and raccoons, the lingos and ringtails, and not ringtails, ringtails stayed here, and kinkajous made their way into South America after there was a good solid land bridge in the past 1 to 2 million years.
Is there any indication of, when we talk about a bridge, most of us visualize this narrow passageway, but is there any way to understand sort of the width or the size of this bridge that you're referring to?
Well, I mean, it probably gradually emerged. So it's shallow. There were some islands that made it possible for some mammals to island hop across these narrower gaps. But again, it gradually emerged. But we're talking about, it depends, probably beginning about 5 million years ago, it was about as wide as Panama is today. And when it was glacial and it was cold, it was probably, 50 to 100 miles wider.
Wow. It's so, I think the hardest thing is to wrap your mind around time, how far back and how long of a process. When we envision these migrations, we think of things like Africa, where they show a picture of tens of thousands of animals walking together in the same direction. That's not the kind of event that this was, right? This was a gradual, little by little movement of animals between the two continents.
Yeah, but again, as I say, I mean, if you just migrate 10 miles a year, and which you could easily do, you could walk much further than 10 miles in a year. They could walk 100 miles in a year.
Right.
Just make it 10 miles in a year. In 1,000 years, which is insignificant when we're talking about millions, 3 to 5 million years for faunal interchange, you can go 10,000 miles. So and again, it wasn't continuous, it wasn't uniform, it depended on climate, depended on vegetation, how fast or slow they can move. So, take something like the Clovis, who may or may not have been the first, the Clovis people may or may not have been the earliest New World humans, but just looking at them, they came across, following some of Paul Martin's work, they came across the Bering Strait about 12,000 years ago, and by 11,000, certainly 10,000 years ago, they were down the Tierra del Fuego.
Man.
That's human.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's crazy. Well, for any of you young people, or not young people, anybody who found this subject matter interesting and would like to become a student of Professor Baskin, I encourage you to visit. I'm sorry?
I have a webpage on Pleistocene mammals. So if you just Google South Texas mammals or Pleistocene mammals of Texas, you can find me in my webpage.
That's what I would encourage everyone to do, to find more about it, to read some of this. I've spent the last couple of days reading it, and it's just fascinating. I guess I'm more amazed that we don't hear more of this, that so many of us are under the impression that these animals migrated from the north down into the country, when in fact there's just as much going on from the south to the north, which I find fascinating. You can go to the Texas A&M-Kingsville website. It is tamuk.edu, and that will take you to their website. You can Google or search Dr. Baskin's name, Baskin, and look for Professor Baskin. And then on that page, he has links to a lot of his work and his webpage. Dr. Baskin, it has been a pleasure speaking with you, and we would love the opportunity to have you come back again and talk about some of your research on some of the tertiary mammals. Would you ever consider, if time permits, would you ever consider coming back on?
Well, why not? As I said to your first request, that's fine. I just wish you had contacted me 30 or 40 years ago when I was younger and less senile than I am now, and I knew a whole lot more and was more enthusiastic about it, but sure.
I don't think you're senile at all. If anything, I was kind of amazed at how much, just for you listeners, we did not discuss this interview in advance. It's not like I laid out all of these questions. These are just cold questions being asked without any prompting. And so, to your point, I got to tell you, your ability to answer 99% of them, and those that you couldn't, you just said that's not my area of study. I'm very impressed, and I'd love to have you back again. And regardless if I caught you now or 30 years or earlier, it was fascinating, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to do this. He is a professor from the Department of Biological and Health Sciences at Texas A&M University, Kingsville, in Kingsville, Texas. Dr. Jon Baskin. Again, Dr. Baskin, thank you so much.
It's been fun. Thank you.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
That was a really interesting interview with Dr. Baskin. I learned a lot of new facts, and I suspect many of you did the same. It was really interesting stuff and pretty amazing. I hope some of you go online and kind of do some research into that migration event, because we really just touched the surface of the variety of animals that were coming and going. When we come back, I'll tell you about a great museum to visit, and then I'll answer a few questions from the listeners on the Ask Dinosaur George segment.
It's Science Safari time, where we share sights to see and places to go. If you have a science museum, destination, or upcoming Earth science event and would like us to promote it, please go to our website, dinosaurgeorge.com, and contact us. Now, here is our destination for this week's Science Safari.
This is a new segment for the podcast called Science Safari. In it, I'll give you ideas of places you might want to go and visit. If you have a suggestion, please feel free to leave a message on this podcast in the message section, or go to my website, dinosaurgeorge.com, and go to the Contact Us button. And I'll try to find somebody from that place to come on and tell us about it, or I'll do a little research and talk about it myself. Now, back in 2007, we were filming for the History Channel, a television series called Jurassic Fight Club, and I had the chance to go into a lot of really amazing museums all over the United States and Canada. But one that I really liked a lot was called the Sam Noble Museum in Norman, Oklahoma. Their website is SAMNOBLEMUSEUM, samnoblemuseum.ou.edu. So samnoblemuseum.ou.edu. This is really a fascinating museum. I really liked it a lot. It's got all kinds of exhibits in there. I, of course, was most interested in the dinosaur exhibit. But to give you an idea of some of the exhibits, they have something called the Orientation Gallery, which is pretty neat because it kind of lays out what to expect. They have a Hall of World Cultures, a Hall of Natural Wonders, Hall of the People of Oklahoma. That's real interesting if you like history. And then there is the Hall of Ancient Life, and that's the one that I absolutely loved. And I was very impressed because it's not a huge museum, but it's got very, very good exhibits in it. One of the ones that's really fascinating is when you walk in, you see this huge Apatosaurus, and you see it kind of in a combat situation with Saurophaganax. So if you want to see a Saurophaganax and how big they are, this is a great museum to see it. They've also got a Tyrannosaurus with a baby being attacked by a pair of Deinonychus. That one's pretty cool. But I must say that the one thing that I left out of there, just amazed with, is they have a fully articulated skeleton of a Pentaceratops. That's a big ceratopsian, kind of like Triceratops. Its skull is 10.5 feet, and it holds the Guinness World Record as the largest skull ever found. So you've got to go in there and take a look. I advise you to go to their website, check it out, try to make a trip there, and I know you'll be happy. Okay, let's do some Ask Dinosaur George questions submitted by you, the listener. This first one comes from Donnie from Massachusetts. Thanks for taking time out of your day to answer my question. My favorite dinosaur is Compsognathus. Can you tell me anything cool about them? Donnie, thank you so much for taking the time to write. I love the little compies. You know, a lot of what people think they know about those dinosaurs was based solely off of Jurassic Park. And they looked very realistic, and there wasn't anything about them that I don't think was accurate, so it's not like it's a bad thing. Compies, the name means elegant or pretty jaw, and it's because they're such small little dinosaurs and built very, very bird-like. And a lot of people pronounce them Compsognathus. It is up to you. You know, when you're transposing English or Greek or Latin to English, there's not an absolute way to do it. I tell people all the time, like, is it Caribbean or Caribbean? Is it Diplodocus, Diplodocus? Is it Apatosaurus, Apatosaurus? Is it Deinonychus or Deinonychus? So I always pronounce it Compsognathus or Compsognathus. Either way, if you do it a couple of different ways, you're bound to be right? This is a little dinosaur. He's about 1.4 meters long, so that's like almost 5 feet, not quite 5 feet. About 26 centimeters tall at the hips, which makes him about 10 inches tall, and he probably weighed around 5 pounds or so. What's neat about him is he's a late Jurassic dinosaur, and that means he lived between about 155 and 145 million years ago, found in Germany and in France and maybe other places in Europe. But what I really like about him is it's a very small dinosaur, and it's one of those dinosaurs that when they found it, it was sort of the same thing with Archaeopteryx. Is it a bird or is it a dinosaur? Because all the bones say it's a bird, and yet the long tail and teeth and arms say it's a dinosaur. Well, as we all know now, it was both of those things. It is a bird and it is a dinosaur. All right, this next one is from Alexander from East Brunswick, New Jersey. Hey there, Dinosaur George. I hope this gets picked. Well, it did, my friend. What do you think of that? I'll make it brief. Oh my gosh, Mihunacosaurus a real dinosaur? Is it Mihunekisaurus? Mihunacosaurus, is it a real dinosaur? I found it very confusing. Some people said it was fictional. Let me know what you think. Good health, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night. Hey, well, good for you, Alexander. Thank you for all of those goods. You know what? I am almost certain this is not an authentic species. I'm almost certain this is a made-up animal. I do not believe it is real. So my guess has to be that this is just a made-up dinosaur. I hope it is, Alexander, because I sure hope I didn't mislead you. But I think it's a made-up dinosaur. All right, let's jump on one more. Let me just click over here. Freddie from Troon, South Ayrshire, Scotland. Hey, can you ever come to Scotland? One time I would really like to see you in my school. You know, Freddie, I would love to come to Scotland and visit you and all of your classmates. Scotland is one of those countries on my bucket list that I hope to visit. So maybe one day, Freddie, if I do, I'll have you show me around and show me the sights and the sounds of your city. Until then, tell your teachers and all your classmates that I said hello, and maybe one day I'll see you. All right, one more. Patrick from Markham, Ontario, Canada. Hi, Dinosaur George. I'm a big fan, and I've always wondered if my favorite raptor, Achillobator, lived with any other raptor dinosaurs, and if they were to come in contact with each other, would they fight? Thank you for giving people the chance to submit these questions, and have a nice day. Well, you know what? That is incredibly kind of you, Patrick. I really appreciate that. I appreciate that you're a fan as well. That means a lot to me. The word fan has always been kind of odd for me. I've always kind of thought of it more of friend. So I appreciate you being a fan, but that just to me means that you are a friend. Now, Achillobator, the name means Achilles' hero. What a cool name, isn't it? Just the word kill in a raptor's name is cool. Achillobator is a member of the raptor family, or in actuality, it's a dromaeosaur. That's what raptors really are. Achillobator's a pretty big dude. I mean, he's estimated to be about 6 meters long, and that's very big for a raptor. Its known locations are Mongolia, and then, I think Mongolia is the only place it was found, right? I think it was. I think Mongolia is it. And he is is he the late Cretaceous? You know what? I believe he is late Cretaceous. And if he is late Cretaceous and he's in Mongolia, then yeah, he is late Cretaceous. I just looked it up online, by the way. I'm not simply doing all this by memory. So he is a late Cretaceous. Okay. So if he comes in contact with other raptors, he's going to probably come in contact with things like Velociraptor. And I'm sure there's other raptors living there that nobody knows about yet, but they'll be discovered one of these days. Would they fight? I believe, based on his size, any raptor with any size brain is going to know to get out of there as fast as humanly possible. Well, it wouldn't be humanly possible. It would be dinosaurian possible. But whatever the case is, I don't think they would hang around. I think they would get out of there as fast as they could. Think of it like a lion showing up and there are cheetahs on the scene. They're related. They're cats, but they're not going to tolerate each other. The lion will eat and kill the cheetah, So the cheetah is going to get out of there as quick as it can. So I doubt very seriously if there would actually be a fight just because of the size of this guy. He's a very nasty dinosaur, and anything in its right mind would get out of there. All right, thank you guys so much for taking the time to write to me. If you have a question, go to dinosaurgeorge.com, click on the Ask Dinosaur George page, submit your question, and I'll do my best to answer it. Well, all right, everybody, that wraps up this episode. I definitely want to thank Dr. Jon Baskin from the Department of Biological and Health Sciences at Texas A&M University, Kingsville, in Kingsville, Texas. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Baskin, and giving us information about that migration. Gigamaggies, by the way. For everybody that wrote in with the Ask Dinosaur George segment, thank you very much for taking the time to do that. I appreciate it greatly. I apologize to everybody for how rough my voice sounds. Like I said, I think it's allergies. Please follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You'll see links on my podcast page. To see the podcast, there's two ways to get there. Go directly to it, dinosaurgeorgepodcast.com, or go to my website, dinosaurgeorge.com, and click on the podcast link. Make sure to visit my online catalog at store.dinosaurgeorge.com to help me pay the bills, because again, I have a Ferrari and helicopter and jets that I have to pay for. And if you people don't do it, I have to go out and work, and I simply am not going to do that. So please go to my website catalog and buy lots of stuff. Until next time, everybody, I'm Dinosaur George.
Thank you for listening to the Dinosaur George Show. Please follow us on our social media links and join our mailing list. If you're interested in having Dinosaur George speak at your event, please visit our website at dinosaurgeorge.com. Until next time, keep digging for clues about the past.